In 1980, Joe D'Amato forever cemented his notoriety. The infamous Anthropophagus, well known for its extreme and controversial violence, is a surprisingly suspenseful and well executed B grade horror film. I'm the Italian Horror Guy, and this is the Italian Horror Guy podcast. So, this was, a slightly surprising experience. I, like anyone who comes to this film, Anthropophagus, if that is indeed how you pronounce it, I was expecting it to be just absolutely terrible. Now, I don't want to be misconstrued. It's not an extraordinary film. But you hear the title, you know it's got a number of those really ridiculous, like a ridiculous number of names, like the Grim Reaper, which it possibly should have actually stayed as. But it's like, it's not actually too bad. I mean, low budget, nothing idea, really. It's a nothing story. But like, in terms of just being a sort of cheap little throwaway horror film in the early Italian horror film, no less, in the early 80s, I thought this was going to be way worse. Now, I might be just about the only person that thinks this because it's not highly regarded. It has a ridiculous title and a very controversial scene. And that controversial scene, let's be honest, is probably the only reason I ended up doing a little series on Joe D'Amato. But nonetheless, I have enjoyed these three films for what that's worth. It took me until about, I reckon, more than 30 minutes into this film for me to go, wait a second. If I didn't know where this was going, if I wasn't just sitting around waiting to see the Anthropophagus and his, let's call it his left-wing activist inspired horror scene towards the end of the film. I'm just joking, lefties. I'm just joking. I would probably have just seen it as like this is a standard and at times okay horror film. Like I'll get to it, I'm sure. But as we go in or we go through the film, there's that section after they arrive at the island. And it's actually like pretty decent horror stuff. Honestly, there's some really, really good suspense. And to be fair to the film, this sounds stupid. I didn't necessarily realize it was suspense for a couple of moments because I'm so distracted by like I already know what the Anthropophagus is because no one in 2023 watches this film for the first time without knowing a little bit about it. You're not going to just watch whatever this is. Like that's clearly not happening. But then it's like it hadn't even particularly occurred to me that the film was hiding the ball on him. And it sort of hit me that like if you're just taking this film on face value, then it's not a bad horror film. So let's get to it. It lets you know, let's say, very, very quickly, that what the feel is going to be. As is always the case, it's very, very hard to find a theme from one of these films that I don't like. And this is no exception. I've literally had it stuck in my head for the last day, or most of the last day since I watched it. And it's crap. Like it's clearly cheaply produced. It just sounds like some kind of very old synthesizer type thing. But like, and also it's entirely inappropriate. I tried to work out what is it? What is this? What is this theme? And I realized it would probably be best placed at like a sort of like a carnival horror film, but involves clowns. If you think about it, you'll understand what I mean. But it's like it doesn't fit at all what's in front of us. Like it really, really doesn't. And yet, it's this film, right? It's like, well, that's just the theme with this film. So you hear that that theme straight off the bat, and you get this weird zoom out of some cactuses or cacti, and then you get a couple of random people wandering through a confined city, or a little, I believe it's a Greek island town, and I am all for this stuff, like the atmosphere and pure vibe that we get out of these. Like it reminds me a little bit of Don't Torture a Duckling, just this sort of older Italian/Greek style buildings, and I just love them. Just good atmosphere. But to note with this, I believe, German couple that we see, everything does feels very narrow, and the camera work I think is quite excellent. And we return to these areas a little bit later. You know, it's a little bit of a callback, saying, well, you know, this is a place that you don't really want to be. So I found this film on YouTube, and that's what I'm going through it with at the moment. And it was initially not clear I was actually a little bit concerned because the German couple are speaking German. There's no subtitles or anything. I'm like, oh no, I might have to find a different version. But then I realized, no, this is just what the film is. They have the German couple speaking German, and they don't tell us what they're saying. It's probably some garbage about wanting to go into the water or not. You know, if I'm trying to give the film real credit, could be like, oh, these people, they don't know what they're in for, and we can't even understand them, and they can't even understand what they're up against. I don't think it probably deserves that credit. So the woman gets undressed, and it seems to be done in a way to be slightly provoking. And then there's a sort of endless or way too long a scene from under the ocean of the woman being attacked by presumably the Anthropophagus. And the way the scene is shot, and what seem to be POV shots, and it cuts back to the dog sort of wandering around, and the husband or the partner just being asleep lying there with some of the biggest headphones I think you'll ever see. Anyway, the way that it's shot implies, and I don't even think it's implying, I think it is trying to tell us that the killer, the Anthropophagus, he was just sitting at the bottom of the ocean waiting for this woman, because he honestly just, like, I don't even know. I can't really remember if anything other elements of this film is necessarily supernatural. I'm sure there's probably a bunch of crap. So he kills her, and we see some blood in the water. Or we see some blood in the water, which implies that he's killed her. And then a POV shot coming up to the guy with the big headphones, and he gets meat cleaved in the head, which is a pretty effective shot. And yeah, great. So he's dead. We've had some great gore and violence to tide us over, which is important because nothing much happens for a while now. So you get a real taste. Well, one thing I really, really love about this era, and why I've ended up doing a seemingly endless podcast series about it, is that you can as good as guarantee that you're going to see some familiar faces that are going to make you go, oh, yeah, that's right. The Italian horror industry was quite a limited concept at the time. There's a guy who I thought was Andrea Occhipinti for a while, and then he wasn't, so I was glad that he ended up dying. But the two characters, or the two actresses that I did recognise, were Tisa Farrow and Zora Kerova. Zora Kerova from Cannibal Ferox and the New York Ripper, and some other things. I think at least one late Lucio Fulci film. And she's great. she always gave a go. To be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that her acting career didn't go a little bit further than it did. And Tisha Farrow is great because she is in Zombie 2 or Zombie Flesh Eaters. Now, it is. It would be bearable, honestly, this section of the film, if there was anything going for the plot at all. Now, I know that's an easy criticism, but there's this group of people who are just on some kind of holiday, and Tisha Farrow is with them, and I'm not going to use whatever the hell their characters' names are. She's just in a chairlift or whatever you call it with them, and here's them talking that they're going to some island or whatever. And one of them, I think, knocks her camera out of her hand, and he's like, "Oh, sorry." And she's like, "Oh, don't worry about it." So I was like, "No, I'll pay for it." She's like, "No, don't worry about it. Oh, we've got to make it up to you somehow." And she's like, "Well, maybe you could drop me off at this really obscure island that you're otherwise not going to." And it's like she seems to go from not unreasonable to extremely unreasonable. You know, a stranger breaks your camera, you don't want to deal with it. But like, frankly, expecting them to do this is actually expecting them to do a lot more than just give her the money to replace it. And anyway, but the thing that that is disappointing about it is that, like, what kind of nonsensical bullshit of a reason to go to this island is that? The thing is, as the audience, we don't know anything really about this area. It's presumably shot here because they probably, were able to shoot there cheaply, or some Italian horror nonsense that you would expect in the era. So it's not at all clear why don't they just put in the plot that that's where all of these people were going. Like, she had some reason to be there, like she had to see her family or something. But all it does is draw attention to the fact that it's a stupid thing to do. Like, as in, it's illogical that they're going there. And I guess it gives a sense of like, oh yeah, well, it's scary. You don't want to go there or whatever. But like, okay, why have that in? But it feels very much like they did it so it would remind us of Zombie Flesh Eaters, because it's a group of, or some people who have a boat who are going on an adventure, and Tisha Farrow in both films shows up and says, "Oh, I need to actually go to this island, so can we go there instead?" Now, the thing that I don't get about that is, like, I get that the cheaper, let's say, more hack Italian horror directors are often stealing ideas off each other, but you're already at the movie. Like, the audience going to go, oh, Tisha Farrow, she has to go to a different island, like she did in Zombie Flesh Eaters. I might stay for the next 80 minutes. It's just bizarre. Anyway, then they're on a boat, and the Occhipinti like guy seems to really like Tisha Farrow. Fair enough, but he's in some kind of open relationship type thing with Zora Kerova, and she gets annoyed at it. And there's some very nonsense, just bullshit conversation, and some just wonderful Coke product placement. Now, I can't imagine that Coke were like, "Oh, have you heard that Joe D'Amato is making a new film about a cannibal or something? We need to stick some Coke in that." It wouldn't surprise me if they would just like, let's just have some Coke. Let's see what Coke do about it. So a bit of free product placement. So there's two elements of this film that really fall down, I think. Two obvious ones. They're all probably obvious, but two that I want to point out here. One is their attempts to add mystique to the story. So there's a lengthy scene of the two lovely ladies talking, and it turns out that Zora Kerova is like she's a tarot card reader or whatever they are, and she predicts bad things happening, which would be a good scene if it was written at all well. Um, but it's not because I think Zora Kerov is well cast for this role. She's always mysterious, quite beautiful. You're like, oh, little bit scared of her. There's something. It's a little bit intimidating, and I think it works. The problem though is that the supernatural elements of this film they just don't feel genuine, because I think without any budget, you are unable to make supernatural things look genuine. So any supernatural elements of the film are just the film telling us that this supernatural thing's happening. The other problem with this film is that it's very boring. Now, I know I've said that I enjoy it, and I do, because the payoffs, they're okay. There's an atmosphere to it. Ultimately, it produced an atmosphere that, frankly, I didn't think possible, like what I knew about the film. But the boring element of it is between shit actually happening. The kinds of conversations that the characters are having are they're just fucking awful. Like, and they're talking about why they're going to the island, and they're saying stuff about some of the people on the island, and they're getting to know each other or whatever. But it's like, what is this awful writing? So, eventually, like Zora Kerov says, like, she does a reading for the pregnant woman, and it says that there's no future for her, but she doesn't tell her that. And then there's a reasonable scene on the boat where she's staring blankly, and for a moment you think that she's annoyed that Tisa Farrow is talking to one of the guys, but no, she's actually freaked out, and she throws the tarot cards into the ocean, and the ocean appears quite black instead of blue, which is cool. And then they approach the island, which reminds me a little bit of King Kong, the Peter Jackson version. And then they go for a wander on the island. Again, Zora's looking very scared. She's sort of rubbing her shoulders, and the pregnant woman is she's too pregnant to go wander around. And now we enter what is very, very clearly the best section of the film. It's the only really actual good section of the film, but I want to be clear that it's very good. And I think it's that it is this film's equivalent, or this version, or this kind of film's version of like the pre/coming apocalypse of the zombie film, if you like. There's that sense that like they've now crossed over into the horrific, and they don't know it / are finding it out. So they all get off the boat and they start wandering around, and we get what appears to be images from the same part of from the same area that they shot the opening scene. And I don't know if they quite emphasize it well enough. Well, you know what? I'll give them credit. It's the same place, but there seems to be less activity. They're walking slower. We've seen what happened to the Germans. We've seen that these areas are ominous, but it just feels like there's nothing around. There's no one around. I also don't know if the film makes clear whether how long it's been since those people were killed. I don't know if we ever find out, actually, but yeah. So they wander around, and there's just some really good shots. Genuinely, there's some really good shots. It has an almost Wicker Man vibe when Howie's when Howie initially arrives, and he's in this strange place, and things just look slightly off. I got to give it some credit here. And then eventually Zora Kerov is with the Ochipinti looking guy, and they see a woman in a window. And they do one of those really dodgy zooms into her face, and she she wanders off, and it's really cheap and it's really silly, but I think these kinds of shots pretty much always work in you know in impending doom, or at least impending serious horror um, movies or scenes. It gives that sense of this place is empty and that's scary, but then you realize it's not completely empty, which is more scary. So they see her and they go into to investigate, and they find that she's written on the window, "Go away," which is pretty lame. And then they see her wandering outside, and yeah, it's like the music through this scene is ominous. It's very, very good. Um, it's got that sense that something bad's happening or going to happen. Then we cut back. The woman's on the boat with, I guess, her husband, and he gets dragged overboard again by someone who's just at the bottom of the ocean. Again, it is heavily implied that the Anthropophagus can just sit at the bottom of the ocean and wait for victims next to that boat. So anyway, the woman pulls up a bucket, and she somehow manages to avoid looking at the bucket. She pulls it out of the ocean, and then she's going to step in it, and I don't know, is she going to make her feet hot or something? And then she steps on the head of, I guess, her husband. I don't know. And then by the time everyone else come back, she's gone, and her body's being dragged away. So I don't know if I've completely done justice to why I particularly like that whole sequence. That there's a certain foreboding nature to the architecture, that sort of white cement, I guess it is, look of these kinds of places. It's like there's an idyllic nature to it, but it's also unknowable. It's also foreign, and you take the people out of it, and it's just these narrow streets. I guess what I'm saying is it's a good setting. It's a good setting for a film like this. The music through it really builds the tension, to quite a surprising extent, I would say. And again, it was during this section that I realized, I was like, actually, this has merit, because the whole time I'm watching the film up to that point, I'm like, well, this is leading to the Anthropophagus thing, and it's going to be doing some stupid killing, and we're going to have some over the top violence. But I was like, hang on, I need to be fair. The film doesn't know that I know where we go with it. And if you think about it, and you should think about it, because it is actually quite difficult to conceptualize this film as with you having not already known about it in the first place. But to be fair to it, it's not a bad reveal. You presume that it's some kind of human-like guy who's doing the killing, but we only get the POV shots up to that point. And then when we get the reveal, as much as the scene that it's revealed in is pretty ordinary, of the Otchipinti-like guy getting cleaved, I think. No, he gets his neck bitten out. The actual shot is epic of him just in the corner there. So anyway, they all agree to chill out in some house for, I don't know if it's one of the houses or the house of the friend. Maybe it's the house of the people that Tisa Farrow was there to see. In fact, that would make sense, because how else would they have got inside? And that they're going to go find the other people in the morning. Cool. So, as in the woman who's disappeared, the pregnant woman. So Tisa Farah goes for a long wander around the house with just a candle, which is pretty cool. She's she's a vibe. I don't want to keep saying that too many times. And this is one of those scenes that reminds you what happens when you really don't have any budget. So she's wandering around for a while, a candle in a dark, possibly haunted house. It reminds me a little bit of that scene in Nights of Terror where that woman ends up getting decapitated. It's a fucking terrifying scene. That really is a great scene. But some of the camera work in this, it reminds me of it. But then it just keeps going and going and going. And then you're like, they didn't have 92 minutes of ideas in this film. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for a lengthy scene that makes a point, but there are too many scenes in this film where you've made your point. Now can something happen, please? Because the point that you're making is not quite interesting enough. So anyway, there's a long build-up. Ochapinti guy appears with a cleaver behind Tisa Farah for our benefit, to make it look like she's going to get murdered. And then there's this just blatant Carrie ripoff. This girl who appears from behind a piano or something. Anyway, she's holding a knife and there's blood all over her. And frankly, they're sufficiently freaked out by the jump scare of it, but they don't seem sufficiently like, why is this woman covered in blood and sort of stabbing at the air like a robot? I just think that their reaction is sort of insufficient. So they take her to a room, and she explains something about she knows when he is around or whatever, and she can smell his blood. And see, this is where this is another part of where the film really fails, ultimately. There are things that could be interesting if they were properly developed. Like, it's an interesting thought that this woman, I don't know, she's been around this island well enough and she smells the blood or whatever. But then you're like, but why is she alive then? Does that make any sense? Like, she why does she uniquely know the smell of blood? Why can she sense that he's around but no one else can? And anyway, I think she's one of the daughters of, of one of the people that Tisa Farrow is there to see. So this is when the film starts to become very tedious, and where I would say it had potential to actually be really good, but it doesn't meet the potential. So don't get me wrong, it is still surprisingly good. I am surprised by elements of this film, but its trick is hiding the ball and then delivering, and it does deliver, but they pull the trick too many times. So, we don't see the Anthropophagus, but we know, he can stand at the bottom of the ocean and kill people. He kills someone quite brutally. Okay. Then we get some crap for a while and there's a head in a bucket. Like, okay, that's brutal again. Then nothing happens and people walk around. And then Carrie jumps out of something. Like, okay. The problem then is, after a while of not seeing the Anthropophagus, we're like, okay, well, when are we going to see him? And this film is either people just walking around or horrible things happening. There's nothing else going on. even on the scene, the fairly lengthy scene of them on the boat going to the island, it's just people chatting. Um, so, and then after someone gets their throat bitten out, everyone's all a bit freaked out and stuff, obviously. But then they just walk around and look for stuff again. And by this point, we've already seen the Anthropophagus, but after that, it feels like the film is like hiding the ball again. So the problem is it doesn't know where to go. And unlike the scene where they first reach the island, which has the advantage of being it's that daytime thing, it's confined, the music's good, the build-up's good, that sense of ominousness, if that's a word, is good. It's probably a little bit on the nose when the woman says go away on the thing and then walks away. But they can't really go back to the well. I mean, they literally do go to a well to end the film, which I hadn't meant to say that, but eventually the formula becomes very tedious. So not long before Ochapintin Like Man dies, he explains to Tisa that he isn't really in a relationship with Zora Kereva, and she just can't give him what he wants. Now, aside from this just being nonsense, what the hell is it doing in this film? Like, they don't know Tisa Farrow, but what is it? It's so misplaced and ridiculous. So he puts her face on his hand on Tisa Farrow's face, and Zora Kereva sees it, and then she runs away. She's sad. She's just running away, and Tisa Farrow follows her. It looks a little bit like Sally Hardesty getting chased in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So she's running, and then she's looking back, and Tisa Farrow, stop, and then she she runs. I think she loses, Zora Kereva loses it, and then Tisa ends up in, I guess, a cemetery. And then Zora comes and just closes the gate. Now, this is one of those things that, okay, this is a serious failure of writing, because the absurdity of the plan, if you think about it, is so utterly ridiculous. But one thing that films, when they're good, what they often get away with is if something that happens is sufficiently interesting, you don't necessarily recognize or care about the nonsense of it happening. The problem is, it's not actually interesting that Tisa Farrow's stuck in this cemetery, because nothing happens when she's there. She just wanders around, and it's immediate. She just runs around and then finds a fence and jumps out. And then there's this ridiculous jump scare where the two of the guys are just standing there, the other side of the fence, and they've been looking for her. But the thing is, you think about it, this whole scene was set up for a jump scare that wasn't. But the other thing is, has Zora Kereva ever been to this island before? Because when you actually think about what happened in the scene, she has seen Tisa Farrow in a scene with her sort of boyfriend, but not really, and she's got upset about it, and then she's immediately thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to run away, and I'm going to lead her into this cemetery, and then I'm going to lock her in it. A cemetery, by the way, that she can get out of. But then the long scene of Tisa Farrow, which again comes immediately after being locked in the gate, that long scene, there's never a sense that she's going to be killed, because the camera work and the way that the audio design works, it's it's not similar to the previous killings we've seen in the film, so we don't even feel like she's in trouble. It's also completely unclear why the two guys are on the other side of the fence. There's no explanation for it at all. But they've said that they were wondering, they were looking for her or something. But anyway, so that whole sequence is just nonsense. There's no need for it to even be there. But again, this is part of the problem with the film. Characters are going from place to place, not clear what place they're going to or why they're going there. But that's what happens in this film to pad out the time. And then we're waiting. So we go back to the Ochipinti guy who's now injured. I can't remember why. And the Carrie girl. And then he wanders around the house for a bit. And there's lots of wandering around the house. And he comes back. And then there's lightning. He closes the door and there's lightning. And we see the Anthropophagus for the first time. And he's creepy. He's pretty fucking creepy. Now you will know that. But yes, he is very creepy. So I would say, let's have a look. We're 52 and a bit minutes into the film. And I would say they've hidden the ball pretty well for who is this creepy killer guy. So that the reveal is then quite good. Given some of the deaths in this film, the fact that the first death we properly see when we've actually seen the Anthropophagus is just him biting the neck of this guy is probably a little bit disappointing. The shot is not bad. It's actually worth mentioning. This is a common D'Amato trope. It happens or at least it happens at least twice in his films. It happens in the film I did last month, which is a podcast you should check out. The Beyond the Darkness episode, where the main character he's having sex with some girl and then she realizes that she's next to a corpse. This is a whole big thing. And then he just bites her neck and she dies. So that happens, and we've got we've got our first proper on-camera death. And then there's more walking around the next day. I can't remember where they're going. I don't care. But the plot needs to get somewhere. So then they just wander around. And they find the woman again. That blonde woman. She's in a villa now, which I guess is sort of interesting, is it? Nothing like a villa in a Joe D'Amato film. They wander into the villa and they stand there for a while, and then there is an admittedly a very good shot of this woman. I think is it the blonde woman? It might be the blonde woman. Jumping over the side of the staircase and hanging herself. But this is when the nature of the acting in this film is exposed, shall we say. Because they just the two men in the scene anyway, the way they look at this dead body, and by the way, none of the four of them try to get her down until she's been there for much longer than they needed to leave her, but they just stare at her like, oh, that's like mildly shocked, I suppose, but like yeah, I don't think there's ever any explanation as to why she commits suicide or whatever, or if she commits suicide. I don't know. Who cares? Then they find Zora Kereva, who's, I think, been taken away. And maybe she apologises to Tisa Farah or whatever. And again, we get more issues with the film because despite all of this shit happening, and specifically this shit happening when they're separated, the characters just decide to separate for no apparent reason. So one of the guys, he goes off on his own, and actually, now that I think about it, who is he? Because I thought the woman's husband, the pregnant woman's husband, was dead. But anyway, there's a bit of a callback to earlier because he walks around and he's in these old sort of structures. They're cool. Again, good setting. And there's a similar shot to some of the ones of the alleyway that we've seen. So that's good stuff. And then he ends up in this sort of crypt tomb thing where he just sees like an endless number of bodies. And again, I don't really know what the hell was going on in the directing in this film. But seeing all these bodies, some of them are quite skeletal, some of them are less decomposed, some of them are just complete skeletons. He just keeps going through. But I don't think he's got any reason to know that the pregnant woman is in here. I mean, maybe he has figured that, she's going to be one of the skeletons, or, this might happen to her if they don't hurry up. But he just is completely unperturbed by this, or basically completely unperturbed. So, nonetheless, it's a pretty good scene. We see some rats devouring a body, and he's getting more and more. He's getting further into the tomb, and you just know that nothing good's going to come of this. Eventually, he finds the woman, which is cool, and I'm expecting, because I've seen the scene before, I'm expecting this to lead directly to the famous scene, and it doesn't. Not yet. It keeps us in suspense. Now, again, the film does suspense reasonably well. It's not clear to me why they given some of the ponderous nonsense going on in this film and the lengthy scenes, it's not clear to me why or what inspired them to be like, let's have a lengthy scene of this guy wandering through this crypt and then not give us the payoff. Let's go to a different scene. But in hindsight, again, as frustrated as I was initially, I was like, actually, this is pretty good. Again, it's probably not great that we've already seen the Anthropophagus, because this would probably be the best reveal. But anyway, we cut back to the villa, and Tisa Farrow's, she's moving some stuff around. She's throwing something. She's smashing a mirror, which is bad luck, and all that kind of stuff. But I'm sitting here waiting for the infamous scene, and I'm not getting any payoff, not yet. But they're building a little bit of a conclusion here. She finds a picture that she smashed of George Eastman, and I think it's quite who plays the Anthropophagus, and I think it's quite effective. We see him, and then we immediately cut to a shot of him. He's walking through the crypt, and I mean, there is a conceptual issue with this shot, which is we presume that it's been a good few minutes since the guy found the pregnant woman, and they haven't really moved anywhere. But anyway, it is a pretty effective shot. He's walking towards them, and the guy is saying something like, "We haven't done anything to you," or whatever. And we know it's going to be bad. If we've never seen the film before, we don't know anything about the film, we know it's going to be bad, but we definitely don't know how bad it's going to be. So there's a very uh, there's an intense close up, sort of zooms into his eyes, and then we get what I think is a pretty good flashback scene. Um, I don't know if the voiceover over happens here, but there's a voiceover or an explanation at some point that like there's a theory that this island, turns people mad or some kind of bullshit. But we go from his face to a shot of the sun in the daylight, and there's a woman and a child, and they look like they're lost at sea, and they look like they're dying. And then George Eastman is there, who's the dad presumably, and he like wakes up. He looks a bit tired and sweaty, and he looks like he's gone a bit insane. And the son's cooked his brain or whatever, and then he kills the mother and the child. I think he stabs them, and it's pretty good. It's the film. It's this the character arc coming full circle, or the full circle explanation. So that happens, and I guess it's like a link to. I mean, what is it? Has he gone so crazy that like, is he actually remembering this? Is he like before he kills in the present? Is he remembering this and he's seeing like a mother and a child, and he thinks, well, I've got to kill them too. I don't know. The stabbing, by the way, is pretty cool. I think as in in the flashback, and then there's the iconic shot of him like he sees the blood on his hands and he screams really, really loud, and then it cuts back to the now, and he's stabbing the man, and I've got the scene on. He wanders over to the woman and he grabs her and he strangles her. So if this film wanted to be even more cruel, he could have done the abortion, shall we say, with her still alive. But he strangles her, and then his hands go down, and it's not clear if he does some kind of C-section. I don't think that's the case. I think this scene is him reaching inside the woman and pulling the baby out, and then he bites into it, the fetus. Now, none of you needed me to explain that. A couple of things on this. The fact that you see the umbilical cord so clearly is not great. Can I say though, like if we step away from the kinds of people that will be upset watching that, which is most people, myself included, can we just say like, especially, this is pre like Martyrs and that type of movie. It's a pretty daring thing to put in a film, isn't it? Like, it really is. It looks effective enough, like realistic enough, but like, if you watch this movie knowing nothing about it, which in 2023 is probably precisely no one, it would be like, for all the events that we've seen, you wouldn't be expecting that to happen, but it does make sense. Like, what we've seen of this guy, he could be capable of that. I'll point something else out about it as well, which is the guy who's been stabbed. He's been stabbed in the chest. But I don't think we actually ever see what comes of him. I don't think we see his body. So for all we know, he actually survives. But he gets stabbed in the chest pretty brutally. So two things on that. One, fair effort for him to still be alive, to see all that. Two, though, Why can't he move to stop? Because again, and it is one of the regular and recurring flaws of this film. Why doesn't he do something about it? Like, he's just watching. When horrible things happen in this film, the characters just watch. And that can be interesting, I think. Like, it can be. But you would need actors to act properly. Like, if you're going to do, oh, look at how scary this is. Look at how scared the actors are. Okay, I can live with that. But, act a bit more convincingly. That said, it is to really drive home just how awful this is. To have the guy sitting there watching it, I think does make it better. So Zora Kereva shows up with her throat slit, and I think when I watched it the other day, I thought she'd done it herself. I don't know if it makes it that clear, but I don't think she has. And then the Anthropophagus shows up with a fucking knife, which after everything we've seen is like, well, that's just disappointing, really. Like, give me a fucking knife. Like, what kind of... That's boring. The most boring has been to this point is like biting someone's throat out. So Tisa Farrow and the Carrie girl, they wander up some stairs for a while. And this is a very, very long scene. A very, very long scene. And given how... Look, to be fair, a bit like Michael Myers, I suspect they were quite inspired by him with this character. A bit like Michael Myers, though, they have established that he's quite slow-moving. He's very slow in that flashback. He's very slow in pretty much every scene. But it gets a little bit Halloween too in a couple of scenes where just grab their legs. So they go up to the attic, and Tisa Farrow gets in first, and the Carrie girl is there, and there was a couple of shots of his face earlier that it feels like he's going to be pretty decisive here. He's gonna hurry up, but he can see them very clearly going into the attic, and their legs would be there, but he's not in any particular hurry. Although he does live on the island, and they don't. So he makes some fairly half-hearted attempts to break in, and they're, I guess, semi-convinced that he's gone. And then we wait a minute, and then the Anthropophagus just bursts through the roof. Now, he seems to have climbed up there awfully quickly, but I don't know if we're doing this in real time. But, it's that same old horror movie trope where the characters are like, they show a degree of relief, which is pretty absurd because, like, what's their plan? Are they going to just sit here forever? Presumably the Anthropophagus is going to come back. But anyway, we've got the generic relieved scene, and then we know that things are going to be bad. So he bursts through, and so she's all Carrie again. She has blood on her face multiple times in this film. And he just pulls the Carrie up by the hair. Blood all over her face, and then he bites her neck, and she's screaming. To be honest, it's pretty gross. It's pretty gory. It's pretty damn good. And there's some close-ups of you can see because Tisa Farrow's like bashing her way through the roof, and there's some close-ups of some like wood splinters. I'm like, oh, is this a visual reference to zombie flesh eaters? There's Tisa Farrow and splinters. Like, yeah, all right, I can live with that. And a couple of the shots just look very much like it. Like the zooming in on the splinters doesn't really make sense because we don't get anything out of it. No one gets splintered in the eyeball. But yeah, so she forces the Anthropophagus away, but Carrie Girl's already dead, unfortunately. And then she climbs back down with her pickaxe. She's now got a pickaxe, by the way. That's what she attacked the Anthropophagus with. She wanders down the stairs. We're pretty much doing this in real time now, people. She wanders down the stairs. She's injured. It's not clear why. I don't know if there's any particular reason for it. She wanders outside. And speaking of going back to the well, suddenly there's a well. I don't know if I've ever seen the well, but again, one of the issues with the film, to make things happen that they want, clearly, they don't offer any explanation or a good explanation as to why it's possible. So she wanders around and she's looking, presumably she's looking for the, she is. She's looking for the Anthropophagus. There's a great shot of the villa that reminds me a little bit of the David Hemmings looking through the house scene in Deep Red. Now, she goes to the well, and the way the camera's working, you know it's going to be in the well. And she leans over, and then she gets pulled in. But the thing is, she steps up, and but she doesn't look into it initially. And then an arm pulls her in. So they wanted this shot, obviously, but then she's in a noose, but it's her arm in the noose. And now the Anthropophagus is at the bottom of the well. Now, not 5 seconds before then, we saw him at the top of the well, or at least his arm pull her in. So I presume, is the film trying to tell us that he pulled her in and then he fell down, but in the process he managed to put her arm into this rope? And then again, this endless scene of her trying to get to the fucking ladder and him just behind her, not grabbing her feet. I guess you could defend this scene by saying, well, they didn't actually know that he knew that she was trapped and he was just going to grab the rope anyway. But it takes a while to grab the rope. It's not clear why it's so slow. She seems to have to climb up a lot more steps than were actually above her. But anyway, she climbs out, and the Anthropophagus climbs out, and then the other guy comes, and he's got the pickaxe now. And he pickaxes Anthropophagus in the midriff. And midriff, is that right word? And then his intestines start falling out. He holds them up. In that way, the Anthropophagus holds things up. Tisa Farrow's all freaked out. And he looks at them. And there's an intensity in his eyes, like, fuck you. If I'm going to die, I'm going to make you watch me eat my own intestines. And he bites into them and he dies, and they look at each other. Again, the guy looks like his favourite sports team has just lost, not like he's just seen a man eat his own intestines and die. And then the movie ends. All right. So I want to make brief analysis, or brief trying to understand this last scene, because I'd seen it before, and I'd sort of thought that it's like this guy, he's just so insane and he's so cannibalistic that he just thought, oh, well, this is food, I'll eat it. But really looking at the look in his eyes, I'm like, is he actually upset? Is he like, fuck, I'm going to die? Does he chew into his own intestines as a means of committing suicide? That's probably about as much analysis as that scene. deserves. Now, I enjoyed it. It's boring. It's stupid. A lot of the things in it don't make sense. A lot of them just happen in order for us to get to a particular scene. But I'm glad it exists. I think that Joe D'Amato's career was a strange one. I think he was a strange man. Purely out of coincidence, I was looking up Lucio Fulci because next year, by the way, we are looking at some major changes to this show. I'm not necessarily going to be doing a film, like one film. I might be doing a section of films from a director, but I've got some plans to do writing and publications. Well, hopefully publications, but writings. And they will form the structure of my shows, I think. So there'll be an episode in January. Look out for it. It mightn't be the third Sunday, but just look out for it. There's some big things coming. Anyway, I was looking up some of Lucio Fulci's work, and I clicked on Door into Silence, or Door to Silence, whatever the hell it's called. Genuinely, this was a complete coincidence, and I went down to reception. It was Fulci's last film. And it says here on Wikipedia, in a 1997 interview, Joe D'Amato said he did not understand why the film, Door to Silence, was a commercial failure, as he believed it was very good, and he had even invested much money into the jazz soundtrack. In another interview in 1998, he claimed this to be the best movie I ever produced. Now, Door to Silence is maybe the most boring movie I've ever seen, and I know that's a big statement, but it might well be the most boring movie I've ever seen. It is a man driving around in a car and getting out of the car and then getting back into the car and driving around following a hearse that at the end of the film it's revealed that he's in the hearse and he's dead. The problem though is the film makes it very, very fucking obvious that that's what's happening. Anyway, the fact that Joe D'Amato thinks that was the best movie he's ever produced, it was a fun fact that it was produced by him, at least according to Wikipedia, indicates Joe D'Amato's taste and maybe more critically, his understanding of films, which wasn't very high. I'm glad for Joe D'Amato's directorial career. I'm glad to have covered it. I'm glad that Anthropophagus exists, but I'm glad that I never have to watch it again. I might watch it again. I enjoyed elements of it. Elements of it work as a horror film, but it is ridiculous. It is stupid. It is Joe D'Amato. And I am the Italian Horror Guy, and this has been the Italian Horror Guy podcast. Join me next year.